Okay, if everybody's ready, I think we're ready to get started. So good afternoon, my name is Joyce Connery, and I am the chair of the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board. I will preside over today's public hearing. With me today are my colleagues on the board, Vice Chair Thomas Summers and Board Member Jesse Roberson. We three constitute the board. Having established a quorum of board members, this hearing will now come to order. Mr. Eric Fox, the board's Associate General Counsel, will serve as Executive Secretary for the hearing. Mr. Christopher Rossetti, the board's Technical Director, and will provide us with the staff's perspective later on this afternoon. Several other members of our staff closely involved with the oversight of the Department of Energy and the Los Alamos National Laboratory in particular are also present today. Today's hearing was publicly announced on August 15th, 2022 on the board's public website and subsequently noticed in the Federal Register on August 18th. This hearing is currently being broadcast live over the internet, and a recording and transcript will be available on our website in coming days. We thank the members for the public for joining us for today in person and virtually. We will note the presence today of some VIPs, so I'd like to recognize Anna Hansen, the County Commissioner from District 2. Thank you for being here, Ms. Hansen. And also Brenda Hawks, who is EM's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Field Operations and Oversight, and the Chief Nuclear Safety Officer for EM. Our first goal of today is to gather information on the status of activities performed by the Department of Energy's Office of Environmental Management, or as we call it, EM, at the LANL Area G Transuranic Waste Management Facility. Our second goal is to gather information on the production activities to be conducted at the plutonium facility, the nuclear safety risks that NNSA has accepted, and the state of planned safety improvements to safety system infrastructure and safety programs. Following our first session today with DOE, we will invite interested members of the public to provide oral comments at approximately 2 p.m. this afternoon. A list of speakers who have contacted us are posted at the entrance of the room, and we generally have listed the speakers in order in which they've contacted us. There's also a table with a sign-up sheet for members of the public who wish to provide public comment, but who have not had the opportunity to notify us ahead of time. We will ask the speakers to limit their comments based on the number of speakers we have to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. Mr. Fox will call on the speakers in the order listed and ask that they provide their name, the organization they represent, if applicable. We'll have another comment period after the NNSA portion of the hearing tonight at about 8:45. So please limit your comments at 2 o'clock to the EM portion of the hearing. For this session, we are glad to meet today with our counterparts from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Field Office, or EMLA for short, and its contractor known as N3B, to continue our dialogue in person on some very important subjects. Though we have exchanged quite a bit of correspondence, you get a lot of letters from us, it's been several years since the board's last public hearing at LANL on environmental management topics. The focus of our last hearing, if you recall, was on the waste containers that involved inappropriately remediated nitrate salt-bearing waste, commonly known as RNS waste. In 2014, one of these drums that was packaged at LANL underwent an energetic chemical reaction after it had been shipped to WIP, the Waste Isolation Project pilot plant here in New Mexico. This event, which resulted in the release of radioactive material and paused waste disposal across the complex for several years, has had profound effect across the complex on operational posture. One key recent development has been a major revision to DOE Standard 5506, which governs the safety basis of transuranic waste facilities. The department has incorporated lessons learned from the WIP event, and has put those into its new standard. It has also taken advice from one of our own technical reports, the DNFSB Technical Report 43, which identified deficiencies in that standard. For the public's benefit, a safety basis document is a documented analysis of work to be performed, the hazards associated with that work, and the safety controls needed to adequately protect, prevent, or mitigate those hazards. One of our objectives today will be to understand progress toward aligning the Area G safety basis with the most current standards and guidance available for transuranic waste facilities. Additionally, the technical focus areas and even the organizational structures at LANL have changed. One of the corrective actions from the 2014 WIP event was to split off environmental management functions from the existing LANL federal and contractor organizations. We now have a DOE field office and contractor solely focused on operations at Area G, the location at the laboratory that deals with the legacy transuranic waste, with the goal of removing the waste from the hill. I do want to underscore the fact that there has been progress made to address the hazards spotlighted by the WIP event. As Mr. Summers plans to discuss in his opening statement, there have been many lessons learned, and DOE has reduced the risks associated with the legacy waste at LANL. That said, we would not be here today holding a hearing if there were not also challenges to be addressed now and going forward. While DOE has addressed the issues associated with the specific type of inappropriately remediated nitrate salt waste that caused the WIP event, there are still many containers at Area G that contain potentially reactive waste. Our DNFSB Technical Report 46 on the potential energetic reactions involving transuranic wastes at LANL discuss this further. While N3B has identified high-risk containers and taken actions to isolate them, significant work remains before those containers can be remediated and the hazards eliminated. We are hoping to understand some of the progress made on this front and DOE's plans to accomplish future work. As we will discuss, this relatively small subset of containers represents an outsized fraction of the nuclear safety risks at Area G. N3B faces other challenges as well. There are several thousand containers above ground and in domes at Area G. While N3B has made progress in shipping transuranic waste off the hill and sending it to WIP, there's a long way to go before the risk is eliminated. May's Sierra Pelado wildfire, the third largest wildfire in the vicinity of LANL during the last 22 years, was a stark reminder of the need to reduce the risk at Area G. We understand that N3B has taken actions to protect Area G waste inventory from these events, and we are hoping to hear some more about those actions today. Hazards will remain as long as transuranic waste remains on the hill. And this is to say nothing of the waste that remains buried underground at Area G. While we understand that most of the work related to uncovering, remediating, and shipping that waste still remains in the future, we'd like to hear more about the Department of Energy's plans and schedule for these activities as well. Adding to all of these technical issues are the ever-present challenges associated with maintaining human capital. Both federal and contract organizations will be doing more work, more hazardous work than ever before, while needing to attract and retain, train talent necessary to plan, accomplish, and oversee this work. The challenge with this work was exemplified just last month when N3B leadership implemented a stop work for all of its operations due to a series of significant issues related to worker safety and the formality of operations. As of last week, we understand that N3B has largely resumed, but continues to review a handful of operations at Area G. To help facilitate our discussion today, our staff has prepared exhibits to be displayed on screen for the benefit of the members of the public, as well as for the video stream. These exhibits are marked Exhibits 1 through 37. All of these will be admitted into the hearing record and will be available as handouts. We've also posted a listing of acronyms and a glossary of key terms to help the public better understand our discussions this afternoon. These documents, as well as all of the exhibits, are available at our website, dnfsb.gov, and are accessible via the posted QR code. Before we introduce and hear from our panelists, I would like to turn to my fellow board members for their opening remarks. And this time, I'd like to turn it over to my Vice Chair, Mr. Summers.
Thanks, Ms. Connery. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Summers, and I am the Vice Chair of the Defense Nuclear Facilities Safety Board. I'm very excited to be here today, and I want to welcome and thank the panelists and the interested public for attending this hearing today. As Ms. Connery noted, during this session, we will be covering activities performed at LANL's Area G. In my statement, I will be highlighting some of the good news stories that I am seeing at Area G, as well as the topics we, the board, have interest in, but unfortunately do not have time to address today. Regarding the good news, I am pleased to report that N3B has recently completed its 100th shipment of transuranic waste from Area G to the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, commonly called WIP. N3B is also working with Triad to ship waste loads to WIP that contain waste containers from across the entire laboratory in a single shipment, including those that are newly generated by the National Nuclear Security Administration. This approach improves improves efficiency, and increases the quantity of waste in each load from Los Alamos. I believe that shipping waste from LANL to WIP is one of the best ways of reducing the safety risk that is presented by the above-ground waste. In September of 2020, the board issued Technical Report 46, which identified that LANL does not consistently or appropriately consider potentially energetic chemical reactions involving transuranic waste. In response to this report, N3B and the local Environmental Management Field Office, which is known as EMLA, acted promptly and appropriately to remedy the situation. Specifically, N3B personnel identified waste containers that may contain incompatible chemicals, improved the posture at Area G by implementing new controls for those waste containers, and improved the Area G safety basis. I would also like to acknowledge N3B's plans for upgrading the legacy Area G safety basis to a document that complies with modern Department of Energy standards. This safety basis upgrade is scheduled to be completed in 2023 and will be one of the first that uses DOE's revised standard on transuranic waste, DOE Standard 5506-2021. Finally, I would like to discuss the topics that the board has continued interest in, but unfortunately will not be able to cover today due to time. Number one, dispositioning the remaining inappropriately remediated nitrate salt waste stored at the waste control specialists in Texas, since DOE is still studying the problem. Number two, venting of flanged tritium waste containers, also commonly referred to as fat wax, that are currently stored in a shed in Area G. Preparations for this work remains ongoing. Number three, negotiations with the state of New Mexico on cleanup milestones. We know this is of interest to many in the audience, but we are not party to the proceedings. And finally, number four, waste isolation pilot plant shipments and allotments for LANL transuranic waste, since we do not have the proper folks present here today from DOE's Carlsbad field office. Thank you, Ms. Connery, for giving me the opportunity to speak. This concludes my statement.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Ms. Robertson, do you have any opening remarks at this time you'd like to share?
Thank you, Chair Connery. I'm going to forego an opening statement for this session. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Robertson. So before I introduce our esteemed colleagues from DOE and from N3B, I would like to, actually, I am going to introduce the panel, sorry. I am going to introduce our esteemed colleagues from DOE. So joining us for our first session is Mr. Michael Michelanis, the manager for the EM Los Alamos Field Office, Ms. Kim Liebeck, the president of N3B Los Alamos, and Mr. Gerald O'Leary, program manager for N3B at Los Alamos. The board has set aside a few moments for an opening statement, so I want to recognize Mr. Michelanis for his opening statement before we proceed to questions.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Michael Michelanis, the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Los Alamos, EMLA, Field Office Manager. I appreciate the opportunity to provide opening remarks at today's public hearing for this session on the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Operations for LANL, Area G Transuranic Waste Management. I want to thank the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board for conducting this hearing to engage in open and transparent discussions. Joining me today are two panel members from our cleanup contractor, N3B, Kim Liebeck, N3B's President and General Manager, and Gerald or Jerry O'Leary, N3B's Program Manager for the contact-handled true waste operations and programs. During my career at Savannah River and over the past year in my role as the new EMLA Field Office Manager, I've had the pleasure of meeting and engaging in technical dialogue with the Defense Board members and the Defense Board resident inspectors, and look forward to a continued strong working relationship with the board. The EM Los Alamos Field Office has been in existence for 7 years. It's considered a young field office compared to other EM sites. EMLA was established in 2015 to allow EM to focus on the cleanup mission and to enable NNSA to focus on national security. As with any transition, we worked through challenges. We executed a successful bridge contract, transition from Los Alamos National Security, or LANS, and our current cleanup contractor, N3B. One of the major accomplishments was the completed treatment of remediated and unremediated nitrate salt waste containers at Technical Area 54, Area G, in 2017. We are nearly 5 years into the N3B cleanup contract and carrying out our mission to safely store waste at Area G and to process and certify waste so that it can be disposed of at the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, or WIP. EMLA has made significant progress in reducing the amount of transuranic waste inventory at TA54 Area G. Since transitioning to N3B as our cleanup contractor in April of 2018, the team has been busy to reduce the risk profile at TA54 Area G. As the chair mentioned, we have completed more than 100 shipments to WIP since the start of the N3B contract in May of 2018. The radiological inventory, or material at risk, has been reduced by 29%, approximately 9,000 plutonium equivalent curies, and the transuranic inventory has been reduced by approximately 1,500 containers. Like all of the EM sites, the COVID-19 pandemic impacted cleanup operations, and the pandemic impacted WIP's ability to receive shipments. For a period of approximately 4 to 6 months, we operated it in an essential mission, critical activities, compliance, and safety posture. We did not complete any shipments until we understood more about how the COVID-19 virus worked, so that we were able to ensure the safety of the workforce. Post-pandemic, we have achieved several accomplishments in our transuranic waste program. We have exceeded the EM transuranic waste shipment goals for the last 2 fiscal years and increased our shipping goal for fiscal year 2023. In 2022, we started up new processing capabilities in Dome 231 for glove bag and drill and drain to process more waste. In September, we initiated a retrieval process for the 158 corrugated metal pipes, or CMPs, buried in Area G. The CMPs originated at Technical Area 21 Radioactive Liquid Waste Treatment Building, Building 21-257, and are now part of the below-ground waste in Area G on top of Pit 29 that we are prioritizing. Next year, N3B will start the process to size-reduce CMPs and ship to WIP, or if possible, to a low-level waste repository if they don't meet true criteria. As the board is aware, your staff has been following the Department of EMLA, the development of EMLA's new documented safety analysis that will replace the interim basis for operations that we have been using. Building the DSA is a top priority for EMLA and N3B. The new DSA will be based on an improved analysis, which will lead to a safety control suite that focuses on preventing and mitigating the real hazards to workers, the public, and the environment. I would like to add that EMLA has provided its notice of intent to exercise the first option period to extend N3B's cleanup contract. Thank you again for inviting EMLA and N3B to the Defense Board's hearing, and I'm looking forward to today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michelanis. So we're going to add his written statement to the record, so you'll be able to refer to that at a later time by going to our website. And we also welcome, if the department wants to submit any more information or testimony to the record as well, you can do so after the hearing. We'll have a period of time for that. So I want to move over to our questions. We're here to ask questions, and you're here to answer them, so that's what we're going to do. And I will take the chair's prerogative to ask the first question. So as we discussed in the opening statements, the 2014 WIP event has had far-reaching effects and was caused by an energetic reaction in a drum that was packaged at LANL. You can see the effects in Exhibit 1. Clearly, some actions needed to be taken so that this didn't actually happen again. Splitting up the operations from NSA's management and operating contractor and standing up Los Alamos legacy cleanup contract was one of the department's corrective actions that came out of this event. To go over a little bit of the history, in late 2015, as Mr. Michelinas mentioned, the EM field office was separated from LANL and NSA field office. And as you can see from the 2014 letter from Secretary Moniz, this set the change in motion. The EM field office set up a bridge contract with LANS, also mentioned in Mr. Michelinas' opening remarks, and the contractor managing and operating the site at the time to manage Area G, while EM field office began the selection process for a new contractor. So, Mr. Michelinas, as you noted, N3B has been operating Area G now for about 4.5 years. Acknowledging that part of this period was impacted by the pandemic, as you noted, can you discuss the benefits and challenges of having taken these actions to separate out a field office and a contractor dedicated to cleanup efforts?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. Well, the benefit is exactly what the department sought to hope by splitting out the two offices. There was an improved focus on the EM legacy waste cleanup mission by having a field office that directly now reports up and is a direct funding from EM. So there's a better focus on the legacy waste cleanup mission. But I think I'd like to talk a little bit about the challenges. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, COVID certainly impacted our ability to continue with the mission for a year to year and a half. But there were a number of challenges with setting up a field office and transitioning the contract from LANS to N3B that I think would be responsive to your question. First, in standing up the field office, a particular challenge and a lesson learned was the need to focus on the infrastructure. When Christine Gellis, who was first tasked by the Assistant Secretary to come out and begin standing up a field office, and she worked until Doug Hinsey was appointed as the field office manager and we transitioned over to N3B into their contract. We relied heavily on NSA's existing infrastructure for getting the work done. Christine had a very small federal staff that reported to her, and EM relied heavily on NSA's subject matter experts and processes during that time between 2015 and when the contract was awarded and transitioned in 2018. For example, a good example of that would be the fact that EMLA relied on NSA to review and approve the documented safety analysis revisions, and the safety basis approval authority resided within the NSA field office manager rather than the EMLA field office manager. That was eventually transitioned over, but that gives an example of how the department was relying on the infrastructure of the landlord, NSA, and a lesson learned from that is an improved and more management and focus on setting up the infrastructure, setting up the processes earlier in the setting up of the field office, and the transition to the contractor would have put the field office in a better position. That's from a federal perspective, and we saw that in 2020 when the Chief of Nuclear Safety came out and did a review of the delegated safety authorities for nuclear safety and found a number of issues. With respect to the contractor and N3B's transition, there were several lessons learned as well. Doug Hinsey did a self-assessment, if you will, of some of the lessons learned and things that could have been done differently. And they boil down to a couple of things. One is an improvement of the factual accuracy of the request for proposal. There were a number of things in the request for proposal that the bidders were to assume would be provided by the government during the transition. For example, IT services, many of the safety management programs, training and qualifications. And when N3B arrived and began to do the transition, they learned that the landlord wasn't able to provide those services. N3B had to develop their own IT system out of whole cloth. Many of the business systems, as well as the technical, they didn't have an accounting system. They had to develop their own HR system. The training programs and the qualification program that N3B would have depended upon had to be built from scratch. N3B was able to blue sheet and bring over many of the procedures and programs and adjust them. Some of them had to be rewritten, but those critical differences were material differences in the contract that had to be addressed and took time and resources away from immediately getting in and continuing the legacy waste cleanup. There was also a significant challenge in terms of the workforce. When the RFP was put out, the intention was to transition essentially the workforce that was doing the legacy waste cleanup under NSA over to N3B to provide them that opportunity. A key element, though, that disrupted it was the questions regarding the pension. At the time the contract was awarded and transition occurred, the lab was operating off of a single-payer pension program, and it took some unexpected work to transition the pension program to a multi-participant rather than a single-payer. That work, that question, that caused caused some uncertainty in the workforce and certainly disincentivized some of the more experienced and seasoned workers that were doing that work for NSA, and led them to question, would they be losing something? Could they transfer whole over to N3B? And it led many of them to take other jobs within the lab rather than transitioning over the contract. So my corporate partner started off the job with only a partial workforce, less than that was expected. They had to recruit additional workers, which means instead of having the seasoned, highly experienced workforce, the experience was a little bit lower and required some additional seasoning, which changed the technical approach that the contractor would have used. And instead of going for the more difficult waste, like immediately early on, like the technical approach out of getting into Pit 9, the Department of Energy changed the technical approach. We pulled forward the corrugated metal pipes, went for that. We put in the drill and drain and the glove bag capabilities to process some of the above ground waste, but there are additional facilities that would have started earlier that were deferred until later. So those challenges really, and addressing the material differences, the government, EM didn't set up our corporate partners to be able to hit the ground running like we had expected, and those were some of the lessons learned.
Thank you. I actually really appreciate your honesty and thoroughness with that answer. Those were exactly the points that we were hoping to bring out so that the public could see the difficulty of that transition. It's not easy being on a landlord site as EM is in this situation, and certainly N3B was faced with a lot of challenges when it started. So the fact that you're a tenant, landlord situation with NNSA, I wanted to just have you comment shortly about your office's interface with NNSA side of the house and any challenges facing the two organizations, because obviously NNSA focuses on production, and that leads to more waste generation. And how is that balanced with the focus on legacy waste handling and disposal? And I know you have a long relationship with Ted Wyke over at NSA, so that probably helps from a personal capacity, as we spoke yesterday. But if you could just make a few remarks, that would be fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. When the field, I was not here when the field office was split off in 2015. As with any separation of any entity into two smaller ones, there's always going to be some hurt feelings. There's always going to be some issues to work your way through, and that was the case with the splitting out of EMLA. I believe that many of those have been addressed, but in order to strengthen that, you mentioned I have a relationship with Ted Wyke. I would like to share that for members of the public who are here. When I joined the Department of Energy in 1995, I went to work for the departmental representative to the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board, and Ted Wyke was already in that office. So I began my career in DOE and worked for most of the first 7 years with Ted Wyke as a coworker. So we built a very good professional and personal working relationship that, as we went our own ways after leaving Mark Whitaker's office, that we kept that friendship and that professional working relationship over the years. And now that I found myself applying for the position here, probably the twilight of my career, I was extremely pleased to find that Ted Wyke was also being selected as the manager for the NSA field office. And that enabled me to start in this position with a level of trust and communication and the ability to have difficult discussions that it could take years to develop with someone who I didn't have that personal relationship. So given that level of trust, and we're able to model the partnering that is expected between NSA and EMLA and push those expectations down within our own organizations as well as with our contractors that getting the work done. And we've set that expectation, and we've seen some results and some improvements over the year that I've been here. And I expect to see, and I'm excited to continue to take on that challenge as Ted and I continue to work together.
Thank you. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Mr. Summers for the next question.
Thank you, Chair Connery. This question will be for Ms. Liebeck. This spring, Los Alamos was threatened by the Cerro Pelado wildfire. Our staff observed, and we applaud, the improvements in how the laboratory as well as the county prepared for this fire, including creating fire breaks to limit fire spread, as shown in Exhibit 2. Ms. Liebeck, given that this was the third large fire in 22 years, has this changed your outlook on necessary safety control strategies for wildfires? For example, have you identified additional specific wildfire preparation improvements that you would like to see to protect Area G?
Good afternoon, and thank you. I'd like to start with a follow-on from our last discussion, and Madam Chair asked Michael Michelanis about his relationship with NNSA. I'll provide a brief commentary on our relationship with Triad, since we are in a tenant type situation on the laboratory site. I think the communications are really strong with Triad from contractor to contractor. And we meet with the lab leadership monthly, and we have a very open dialogue with at least two of their senior leaders. We work issues, we can pick up the phone and call each other as needed. And we are performing most of our work on the laboratory. And there is daily interface at various levels of N3B with counterparts at Triad. So I would say, I would echo Michael's comments about transition being a little rough, but since Triad has been over there for several years and N3B has been stood up, we are communicating, I think, very effectively. We also have a contractual arrangement where we can provide services to each other. We can get services from them, and we can provide services as well. So all of those communications and services have really, we've kind of worked through the bugs. To get to your explicit question on the fire, in May, we found ourselves, or actually late April into early May, we found ourselves in another fire situation. And fire is something we are always concerned about at Los Alamos because of the two fires you mentioned. And we get emergency preparedness services from Triad, but we work together as a unit. You will see that Triad and Los Alamos County and N3B and the other entities in the vicinity of Los Alamos are all trying to work together because it's a unit up there. The schools are part of that as well, and so it behooves us to function as a unit, and Triad does an excellent job of taking command and control as the laboratory, and then getting the comms out and getting the people talking and interfacing together. So the fire, we all just kind of fell into our positions, and we were able to work through that. Fortunately, the fire didn't encroach upon the laboratory boundary, but to your point, it's a stark reminder of what can happen, and in this particular case, it was on the other side of the laboratory, so it wasn't immediately adjacent to Area G, but still, one of our primary objectives is doing vegetation control around Area G. And there's certainly zones where Triad, takes the lead for certain vegetation control, and then N3B has, we have our spaces, but we are very diligent about our vegetation control because that would obviously fuel the fire. and also in some of our other areas where we work on the laboratory for our environmental remediation activities, veg control is of paramount importance. And if you don't mind, sir, I can ask Jerry to comment on some of the transuranic waste specific activities.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, so at Area G, we remain in a ready state for wildfire mitigation. Our safety basis documents require us on a monthly basis during the growing season to do inspections of our defensible spaces. And those defensible spaces are maintaining vegetation control around fire hydrants or where firemen have to hook up their hoses. This defensible space also includes our storage locations as well. We do that on a monthly basis or even more frequently. The minimum is on a monthly. Then we have a minimum of vegetation control and vegetation cutback on a monthly basis as well. But during the growing season, that's more frequent than on a monthly basis. Not only around our defensible spaces, but we also do it around the perimeter of the Area G fence line. So that vegetation is also controlled. Other things that we're starting to implement now are in the winter season is to start looking at getting ahead of and doing vegetation and cutbacks during the winter season as we can. That way we get ahead of the springtime wildfire events that occur. So we are always proactive in what we're doing at Area G for vegetation mitigation.
Thank you, Ms. Leback and Mr. O'Leary. Chair Connery, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. I think Ms. Roberson has the next question.
Thank you, Chair Connery. Here we have Exhibit 3. And Exhibit 3 shows locations at LANL where the waste containers are loaded for shipping to WIP. On the left side is a picture of the ramp shipping facility, and on the right side is the mobile loading unit at Area G. As we understand it, the number of containers in a shipment to WIP depends on many factors. For example, just considering container size, a transport truck can accommodate roughly 40 drums or just 6 standard waste boxes. So Ms. Leback, how many containers are actually ready for shipment to WIP, and when do you expect to ship those containers?
Thank you for that. As was noted in the earlier introductory comments, we have made a major milestone in our transuranic waste shipping, and we have shipped 100 shipments, actually more since our press release on that, but I think we've done very well. Michael Michelanis noted that during the beginning of our contract, we did have a slightly slower pace when we were wrangling COVID, which we're still wrangling COVID, obviously, with the mask. But we did have fewer shipments at that time. Right now, we have approximately 2,200 containers that are above ground at Area G. And of those ready for shipment, I will confer briefly with Jerry.
Okay.
I can continue on with that. So of the 2,200 containers we have about 450 that are in the queue. They're either in the certification process or have been certified for shipment. Of that 450, we have about 170 that are certified currently for shipment, and the other balance is going through the certification process. So that's where we stand right now, and that's about 10 shipments worth of containers based on 5 to 10 shipments based on how we load manage those true packs.
Any idea when you might see those 5 shipments go?
We are on the books now. I think we actually had some shipments go out, so we're routinely shipping every week.
Okay.
And we do talk with Michael Michelanis each year and establish goals for shipping, and we do that every year, and right now, discuss 40 shipments per year for our goal setting.
Thank you, ma'am. So you still have quite a few drums up there that you have to deal with. Are there some things that N3B can do to help accelerate preparing those drums for shipment? Yes.
Yeah,
Mr.
I'll
O'Leary.
go ahead and take that question. Yeah, so of the 2,200 drums that we do have there, they're all in safe and compliant storage right now. Like we said, we have 450 in the queue. We're also bringing on additional characterization capabilities, such as a real-time radiography unit, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. It's just like when you go to the airport and you put your bag through the X-ray unit, tells you what's in it. So we're bringing an additional unit on there for that. We're also refurbishing some of our equipment. We've experienced some downtime with some of our characterization equipment, such as the high-energy real-time radiography unit that we currently have. So we're refurbishing that to increase the capacity, or the throughput, or the uptime, actually. And we're also going to refurbish one of our non-destructive assay units as well. These are old pieces of equipment, so the downtime, we're going to minimize downtime on those units. So that'll increase the availability of feedstock for shipments. We've also, as Michael alluded to, established additional remediation lines within Area G. We're in there processing right now. We have what we call a drill and drain operation, and we also have what we call a glove bag operation. And those are ongoing right now. And as those containers come out of the remediation, they'll be available to go into the certification process. We didn't have those in the past. We stood those up over the last year. And additionally, we have below some corrugated metal pipes that we're retrieving. Now, those don't require remediation, but they do require size reduction. So we're in the process of retrieving those now, and then we're in the readiness phase of the size reduction process. And we look to bring that process up in the third quarter of this fiscal year. And once that process starts and we start to shear those CMPs, that'll provide additional feed for the characterization and subsequently shipping.
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Michelanis, as you probably know, when we travel to the sites, we take the opportunity to meet and hear from local community groups and members of the public. And I'd like to give you an opportunity to address one of the concerns that we heard. As Mr. Summers stated in his opening statement, N3B and Triad are working together to maximize waste loads and shipments to WIP. So 2 points if you could address. One, assuring that does not diminish the commitment and priority to removing waste from G area. And two, where can the public find information about these shipments as they occur so that they can understand that is still moving waste from the Mesa?
Thank you, Ms. Roberson, for the question. I would like just to clarify for the members of the public that may be observing, we're sharing some numbers of drums and approximate numbers. I know the board is very much aware of this, but for the benefit of the members of the public that might be listening, the numbers that we share, we're using approximate numbers because the number in characterization, the number that are ready to go vary from a day to day as we ship some, as we process some, as we move through, as it gets through the certification process. So we're using approximate numbers today just because what was correct a week ago will be different this week as we continue to make progress. Regarding your question, I think you're speaking to the commingling of shipments and rather than just a pure when the WIP sends the shipment truck up to a ramp to load the EM legacy waste. Sometimes we don't always fill the 3 true packs completely with environmental management's legacy waste, and there's a very good reason for that. And if you'll indulge me, I'll explain that. And I'm going to use layman terms for the most part of this for the benefit of the public who might be listening. There are limits that we have to abide by in order to either for the shipping of the containers or what can go actually to WIP itself on a truck. A couple of examples that come to mind is a weight limit. You can't overload the TruePack container. It's only certified to a certain level of weight or MAR or plutonium equivalent curies that you can put into a shipment. So when we run up to that limit, if we don't completely fill up all 3 true packs, we have to load empty drums called dunnage in there to fill up the rest of the true packs, because you don't want to let the soft chewy center of the Tootsie Pop rattle around inside of a true pack. So rather than sending in empty dunnage drums, the department, EM will back off of that limit a little bit and allow the remaining to be picked up by some newly generated waste so that we completely fill the true pack up. An example I use, this question comes up many times in our cleanup forums. It comes up, it just recently came up with the a presentation I made to the New Mexico legislature. I use if you're trying to load a cord of wood up into your pickup truck, you're going to have a weight limit of what you can put into the bed. Let's just say that's 1,000 pounds. And you got 10 cubic feet of space in your pickup truck that you can go use. Well, if you hit that 1,000-pound limit when you're only at 7 instead of the 10 cubic feet, you don't want to drive home with the part of your truck empty. You're going to take a little bit of that out and put some of the lighter wood in instead, so you can fill up the entire truck bed. That's kind of what we're doing with the commingled shipments. EM will fill it up to the limit, then we'll back off a little bit and let some of the newly generated waste go in, so that I'm not sending dunnage and empty drums in the trucks and shipping air to WIP and then putting air down into the mine. That's kind of how we do this. With regards to how where the public could go find the data on what's in, I don't track that data. Actually, that's the metrics that we set for our corporate partners are to meet the goal for the shipments. In this case, this year we're going from 30 to 40, and we set processing goals for how much transuranic waste and mixed low-level waste we expect to process and ship and dispose of. I have not established any parameters or metrics, rather, I should say, for tracking the amount of newly generated waste versus EM waste that goes in a truck. And so there isn't really a place that the public could go to get to that information. Frankly, the field office isn't focusing heavily on that either. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. The answer to the question they mainly had was, where can they learn about the shipments? And you don't track that, but is there someone else who does?
Ms. Robertson, nobody that EMLA does not track that, to my knowledge. WIP doesn't track that either. The data is obviously available. We know everything about everything that goes into a particular shipment or down the shaft into the mine, but we don't track that or collate that or put that anywhere for my own use, let alone the public's use at this point in time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I just want to point out, I know that you recently in New Mexico, in the Santa Fe area, WIP came up and gave some presentations to the public, and I know, Mr. Michelinas, you've made it kind of a mission to be more open with the public than perhaps your predecessors were. So just based on Ms. Roberson's questions and what we have heard from the public last night, it would be very welcomed if you had more of a dialogue with the interest groups who are specifically interested in this issue area. So I want to change the line of questioning, and I do recognize, I want to pull from some of what you said earlier and kind of move on to the waste handling situations at Area G. You mentioned the fact that the difficulties that Triad had, or sorry, that N3B had when it first stood up, and the fact that there was I won't call it a deep dive, we'll call it a deep dive from the Chief of Nuclear Safety into some of the challenges that you were facing, and that you actually switched up how you were going to do work and worked on more of the low-hanging fruit versus the more specific challenges. And we just talked about the number of above-ground waste containers that need remediation. And we recognize that, as you spoke about earlier, that we've had some additional approved operations to remediate these containers, and I think we've got those up on the screen right now in Exhibit 4. So on the left, we have that glove bag operations that you spoke of. which is used to contain radioactive contamination while workers sort through drum contents to remove prohibited items. This is what you have to do before you can ship to WIP. And on the right, we see workers perform what you've heard our colleagues mention, the drill and drain operations to empty free liquids. So these are positive developments, but more capabilities will obviously be required to process the containers that require remediation. So my first question, and I guess it's to Mr. O'Leary, is given the challenges that you've had, the stop works, the difficulties with conduct of operations, can you just describe how this work is going and how the public can have confidence in it to start with?
Yes, thank you. I think I'm on, right? Okay, all right. So this work is going very well. We've experienced a longer time to remediate the drill and drain work drums than we had anticipated. There's more liquid in those than we had real-time radiography has shown. But this whole process that we've have here, both the drill and drain and the glove bag, went through our safety basis analysts. We went through a rigorous readiness process, both from a management self-assessment, a contractor readiness assessment, and a federal readiness assessment for these activities. And we go through those to make sure that we have all the controls in place so we operate safely. So now that we're getting some operational history, we've also made some additional changes to these processes to make sure that we stay within our safety envelope. So we'll continue on with these operations as well. We haven't started the glove bag operations of yet. So as soon as we're done with the drill and drain, we'll go into the glove bag operations. But before we'll do that, we'll do another mock-up to make sure we're ready to perform those operations.
And if I may, Madam Chair, if I can interject, your question is focused on how can the public have confidence that these processes work. Jerry mentioned that the glove bag operations had not started up yet. I want to elaborate on that a little bit because that gets right to the heart of why the public can have confidence in the processes and the rigor that we're applying. My corporate partners and DOE did all those things. We've got the safety analysis and the safety basis in place for it. We did the readiness, we were working up to it. But as we were approaching the point of starting up both those operations, I'll give credit to the resident inspectors. They shared some information, some questions they had. And when the Department of Energy and N3B looked at the questions and the concerns they had, it dealt with the ambiguity of the procedures. You know, sometimes the Department of Energy relies on skill of the craft. You'll hear that term many times in doing work, and rather than prescriptively laying everything out that often, we'll have to stop if you have to change a happy to a glad in it. The resident inspectors raised some questions on the level of ambiguity, and DOE and N3B took another look at that and decided we needed to do something about that ambiguity. We delayed the startup of the drill and drain by about a month, and the glove bag by even longer. So again, the process works. We have very rigorous processes, and when information comes up, even if it's right at the 11th hour of getting ready to start up, we will pause, look at it, and deliberatively decide how we're going to move forward. In this case, we chose to delay the actions in order to clarify some things so that we didn't have a conduct of operations issue 6 months after starting up.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And we understand that stopping work when you have a challenge is very important. And I just want to point out to the public, the resident inspectors of whom he's speaking are actually DNFSB employees who we actually have assigned to the laboratory. They're not federal oversight employees, nor are they N3B employees. So they're our employees, and we are a small organization. So we have 2 resident inspectors on site at this point in time. So while we're glad that you were able to get that information from them, it is a little bit concerning that it took the resident inspectors raising the issues to get you to that point. Ms. Levack, it looks like you had a question.
Madam Chair, I might add, we did initiate a stop work in the October timeframe. We were seeing some issues in our field operations. One example is a heat stress illness that was realized when we were commencing our corrugated metal pipe operations. And we had some other examples of safety issues, which were hand-related, head bumps, and other activities. And then a couple of examples in our environmental remediation activities. So as a company, we said, let's take a stop here, go back and re-look at our processes and procedures and release these field activities on a case-by-case basis once we go in and basically approach it like an integrated project team approach and re-look at those activities. So I feel like that is the only thing to do in that situation. We're looking at our data, we're looking at our metrics, and we weren't satisfied with what we were seeing. So we called a stop work, and we have released our field activities. We do have some follow-up actions that we'll be working probably for the next 6 or 8 weeks as we proceed, but we have to exhibit that stop. You know, a trite expression is go slow to go fast, right? So when we look at our data and it's not what to our liking, we will stop and then reapproach.
I appreciate that. So the last question on this line, again, we talked about the glove bag operations, which haven't started yet, and the drill and drain. Clearly, there are going to be containers that this will not be sufficient for remediation. You're going to have to look at new capabilities and maybe potentially new facilities in order to remediate some of the more difficult waste. So I was just wondering, I guess this is for Mr. O'Leary, what is the current plan for that, and what do you project to do that you'll need to do in the future in order to be able to address some of the more challenging above-ground containers so that they can be certified?
Thank you. Once again, these numbers are approximate again, so I forgot to add that. But of the 2,200 containers, we have about 1,550 that require remediation. And about 450 of those we can do on our current processes that we have. And the remaining 1,100 will require additional capabilities that we currently don't have. But we are currently in the planning process to do those in our option period of this work. And that includes a glove box, a shielded glove box, and a compaction capabilities. Of that 1,100 containers, more than half of them just require compaction. So we're already in the planning process to put that together now. We haven't identified all the what we need to do, but we're in that process.
Okay, so just a follow-up. Are you talking to Idaho and Oak Ridge about their facilities that have similar challenges?
Yes, we do, and we are also talking to the Oak Ridge folks. We're actually sending folks out there in December to look at the glove box that they have out there at the TWPC, True Waste Processing Facility there.
Thank you for the acronym policing. I appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to turn the questioning over to Mr. Summers.
Thank you, Chair Connery. I have 2 questions that I'll direct to Mr. O'Leary. But first, Mr. O'Leary, as I noted in my opening statement, the board's technical report number 46 identified that LANL's currently Area G safety basis does not appropriately consider a potential energetic chemical reaction involving transuranic waste. In response to technical report number 46, EMLA and N3B took action to ensure that Area G was in a safe condition. As a part of this effort, N3B identified roughly 30 containers in their above-ground waste inventory that may contain incompatible chemicals. So the first question, Mr. O'Leary, is Exhibit 5 shows some of these containers. Would you discuss the actions that N3B took in response to technical report number 46?
Yes, thank you. We provided barriers around some of the Tech 46 containers. These are physical barriers to protect them. We also double packed these containers as well. We put prohibitions on how we would move them. When we move these containers, we have a designated route that we move them through. We also, when we double pack them, they're fitted with a lid restraining device that stays on them. When we move them again, once again, we move them on a metal pallet. They're strapped to those metal pallets. There's an independent verification that those containers are strapped to that pallet. We also only move them with propane fork trucks. We do not allow them to be moved with diesel or gasoline fueled. We have a designated route once again when we move them. We have spotters that have a standoff distance. And then we limit any other activities that are occurring in the area that they're stored or when we're moving those containers. Once they're at their final place that we're going to store them at, they're on a single planar array. So those are the actions that we've currently taken to move these. And once again, when we do them, that's done under a critical lift plan. So we know everything that we're doing when we're moving those containers.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. The second question is, what is the plan to remediate these transuranic waste containers and to prepare them for eventual shipment to WIPP?
I'll start this question, and Michael is probably going to weigh in on this, but our plan right now is we plan on using this shielded glove box that we're currently in the planning process. So that's in our option period. We're going to identify the risks and hazards, but right now we have to develop the design basis for that glove box. And like I previously stated, we're sending some folks out to Oak Ridge to look at their glove box so we could perhaps use their design and bring that to N3B at Area G.
Jerry, I don't really have anything else to add to that. I think you got it.
Okay, thank you.
It's in your proposal for the option period, which the Department of Energy is currently evaluating, and we'll be entering into negotiations with them after we've had a chance to fully understand the proposal and the different things that N3B is proposing to do under the option.
Thank you for your answers. Chair Connery?
Thank you, sir. Ms. Roberson, the next set of questions are over to you.
Thank you, Chair Connery. Splitting off the EM mission, as Mr. McLean referenced in his opening, to a new field office and contractor resulted in an overall increase in the workforce at LANL that is devoted to the cleanup mission. That's occurring during a period when Triad National Security is also pursuing record hiring. Exhibit 6 shows some nuclear operations occurring at Area G. We all know these operations require a qualified contractor and federal workforce to execute safely and provide oversight. Ms. Lieback, would you briefly discuss N3B's hiring situation and any actions you're taking to hire and retain during the same time period that Triad is concurrently exhibiting record hiring activities from a limited resource pool?
I would tell you that recruit and retain and safety are two of the top items on our N3B risk register. And Triad is in a enhanced hiring posture, but so is the rest of the country. I mean, I will tell you from my discussions with the other contractors at the various DOE sites, it's a hot job market out there. And we continue to lose folks to places all across the country. It's not just DOE work, it's also oil and gas and other industries. So it is a very hot job market, and we've really had to amp up our recruiting, and basically we are conducting job fairs very frequently. Those are being conducted right now in the local area. We've had job fairs at Northern New Mexico College in Espanola and also Cities of Gold. And we have open dialogue with the Pueblos, and trying to make sure they're aware of our hiring opportunities at N3B. Our company is approximately 650 people, and that includes our critical subcontractors, but we also can get parent company reach back through Huntington Ingalls Industries and BWX Technologies. And so we're employing this multifaceted approach to recruiting, and we are working it very hard. We probably have 40 open requisitions right now, but that's, I mean, our attrition is nearing 25% for the calendar year, and it will require very aggressive attacking throughout the rest of the year, and getting them on board is the first step. Then we have to, you know, make sure the people are trained. We typically give them a hearty training register to get them through all of their courses, and then depending on what their background is, they have additional OJT, what have you. We've also worked with the local colleges, Northern New Mexico College and University of New Mexico, Los Alamos, on a nuclear apprentice program and rad controlled technician type boot camps where we can bring in junior employees and get them kind of grow our own. And many of the contractors across the complex are employing similar techniques with the local universities in their area. So we've been able to get many people through the boot camps. We also have support service type contractors that we have access to. We've set up arrangements through our contracting mechanisms to work with our support service contractors, and we're trying to cover all the bases there, and it will continue to be a challenge for the foreseeable future. And for the option period, we will continue to work with our DOE client and talk about maybe things that we can obtain, like maybe you know, look at our pay banding and other things that we can work together to help us be more competitive. So we are experiencing, I would say, a fairly high attrition, and I'm sure DOE and federal employees have their own trials and tribulations as well, but we are definitely attacking it with reckless abandon, and will continue to do so and get the people in the training and try and get the junior people paired up with more experienced personnel as they transition into their work and what have you. So briefly, those are some of the things that we are currently executing.
Thank you, ma'am. You can see it's high on your list.
Right.
Yeah. So, Mr. McElhaney, I'm going to assume you have some similar challenges, but we do understand that you have been more successful at attracting and retaining personnel as technical assistance contractors to perform duties similar to facility representatives, rather than attracting folks to actually fill the federal positions. Would you discuss your thoughts on the root of that situation and tell us how that is progressing?
Thank you, Ms. Robertson, for the question. I do have some challenges. As I mentioned, Christine Gillis started the office with just a handful of people. My currently approved staffing plan includes 41 federal positions. I currently have 30 of those filled, and I am actively recruiting to fill the remaining 11. But in the meantime, the field office, as we are a small field office, we rely heavily on corporate reachback. I depend upon Brenda Hawks and her staff. I can reach out to some of my fellow coworkers that used to be at Savannah River and across the complex for additional technical resources, but I also have a very significant level of support from my technical support contractor. That's about 31 employees in total that augment both my business functions as well as my technical oversight functions. While I do have some of the technical support does do operations oversight, I do not hire them rather than focusing on the recruiting of federal facility reps or equivalently in nuclear safety specialists. Those two resources are particularly hard to find because you can't go to a college and just hire a graduate who's been trained on nuclear safety or one that has operations oversight. But we are looking at some things like I've asked my Office of Business Operations Director to figure out how do I go to the shipyards? How do I go to some of the large naval bases and find the senior chief petty officers and outgoing naval officers who may not be interested in serving a full career in the Navy, but have an incredible wealth of operations experience that translates very well to, depending upon their background, to nuclear safety, if they have a college degree and have done that kind of work related to the concepts, or operations oversight, which frankly a chief petty officer, senior enlisted, or an officer would be absolutely wonderful in coming in. So I am focusing on trying to fill those federal positions. They're very difficult, first to find and then to attract to come to New Mexico. A lot of people like to live in sunny South Carolina, Tennessee, which actually has 4 seasons. So we are working very hard to try to fill those vacant positions, but I make sure that I've got adequate corporate reach back and support from my technical support group.
So while you're working on both arms, trying to fill with federal employees, do you foresee the need to increase the number of technical assistance contractors that you're utilizing?
Ms. Robertson, thank you for the question. I did increase it a little bit when I first came to the field office. I don't remember exactly how many I had, but I've selectively, as the pace of operations changes or I need additional resources, I've gone out and sought those, and I have the budget to do that if I needed some additional. I'm not at the ceiling of the support contract, so I can get additional resources if the situation warrants it.
And is that working well for you right now while you try to hire and retain?
Yes, ma'am, it is. I would certainly like to hire and fully fill up my federal positions. That's much more preferable. And when I do reach fully fill all my vacant positions, I'll be looking again at my tax support to see what kind of adjustments I need to make from there. But right now, they're really filling in for that gap, and I would expect the level of support and how I'm using it to be reallocated and changed once I reach that fully staffed condition.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair.
I'm not going to make a comment about that 4 seasons remark you just made. I don't know if you made a lot of friends in Santa Fe by saying that. But so we talked earlier about the fact of EM's Chief of Nuclear Safety, Ms. Hawks, conducting the review of EMLA in 2020 that identified concerns with the field office's ability to perform its nuclear safety regulatory functions. Some of these concerns got at a rather fundamental problems paraphrased here in Exhibit 7. There weren't adequate processes or procedures in place to facilitate nuclear facility safety oversight, nor were there adequate ownership of documentation of field office products. And we talked a little bit earlier about safety bases and obviously new operations that had FRAs and other reviews by the feds. So I know that a lot of those challenges predated your tenure, but you're in charge now. So after implementing some of the corrective actions from that assessment, what credible measures are you monitoring to ensure that EMLA is on the right path to perform these functions again?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. I actually had the dubious pleasure of, while I was the acting Deputy Assistant Secretary in 2021, of commissioning that Chief of Nuclear Safety review. And one of my first actions reporting to Los Alamos in August and September, I signed the corrective action plan to go address those issues. So I think Brenda Hawks and her team did an excellent job of digging in and identifying. I mentioned earlier, one of the lessons learned in standing up the field office and transitioning was the need to focus on the infrastructure. And part of that infrastructure is establishing and institutionalizing the procedures and policies for how we do our business, particularly the nuclear safety and technical functions that support the safe operations of the facilities. So The Chief of Nuclear Safety found, I think it was 5 findings and 5 management concerns, which drove a corrective action plan of about 53 items. Most of those corrective actions have been done. The staff has started to review the status, the closure packages of those. A couple of them we've identified need a little additional work. Once I finish with the closure of all those actions, we will be doing a further follow-on review of those to ensure that the closure and the actions that have been taken are effective in addressing the issues and the causes. So in response to their assessment, we're establishing and institutionalizing those procedures. We're ensuring that we've got a formal process for trending and managing the records, that we're adhering to the timelines for developing nuclear safety analysis, reviewing issues, processing, discovery, USQs, PISAs, things like that. And another important thing is ensuring it create a sensitivity, partly why we're using so much tax support, of ensuring that we have compensatory measures in place when staffing levels are not where they should be. And those are some of the lessons learned, some of the actions that I'm taking. I hope that I answered your question. If not, I'm happy to elaborate if you'll focus me a little more. And the Four Seasons was actually not to offend my new residents in New Mexico. I was thinking of South Carolina, where it's either summer or kind of spring. There's not much of a winter, but I might have a little explaining to do when I come off the stage tonight to some of the new friends I've made in New Mexico.
It's the land of enchantment, just reminding you of that. So I didn't have any specific questions here. I mean, I think you touched on them. You know, some of it was the timeliness for reviewing safety basis approvals, PISAs, which for the audience, potential
inadequacies of the safety analysis. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for catching my acronym.
So those were the types of questions that I had, and it sounds like you're reviewing those. Are you going to invite back, or do you expect Ms. Hawks? I know she's here now, but is she going to come back to do another review to see that you're making progress in those areas?
So thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Ms. Hawks and some of our staff were actually involved in the review of the closure packages with me. So I've asked them to be involved in the closure process as well, although as the field office manager, I have the authority to close the CAP and the corrective action plan and the actions that come from it. I know that Ms. Hawks is actually going to be coming back out and doing more reviews. The first review was just focusing on our nuclear safety authorities, but there are many other delegated safety authorities that EM 3.1 needs to, under the orders, has a responsibility to go out into the field and just check to make sure that the field is maintain the capabilities to execute those authorities responsibly.
Thank you. And I know that you understand that we are keenly interested in the safety basis, and so I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Roberson to further pursue that line of questioning.
Thank you, Chair Connery. Yes, we are. I think you know we are always very interested, especially the safety basis for G area. Since January 2020, N3B has uncovered many issues with the Area G safety basis. One such issue was regarding the spatula-like tool that blocks drum vents during headspace gas sampling. And we can see a picture of this tool on a drum in Exhibit 8. This condition was not analyzed in the safety basis, so gas sampling operations were paused. Despite this being a relatively simple operation, challenges with getting the safety basis paperwork squared away properly meant that flamm gas sampling was not resumed until August of 2021, almost 2 years later. By contrast, Triad completed a safety basis change for the same issue in about 2 months. This is just one example of N3B and EMLA having difficulties with the timeliness of the safety basis review and approval process. On August 17, 2022, the board issued a letter to DOE encouraging it to expeditiously complete and implement a modern Area G safety basis. It appears that all stakeholders have recognized the new safety basis for Area G continues to be a top priority. This has been a long journey, given that EMLA determined a new safety basis was needed back in 2015. So Ms. Leback, last we understood, it was N3B's goal to submit the new safety basis documents in January of 2023. Is that still the case, and what is your confidence in meeting that?
Yes, ma'am, that's still the case, third quarter fiscal year '23, and I'm highly confident that we will meet that. I would like to comment on some of the question parts there. We have been using an older safety basis document, and the Department of Energy requirements and regulations change over time, and we've had a lot of these requirements for essentially 30 years in some way, shape, or form. They vary whether they're in a DOE order requirement or if the department goes in the rulemaking. But we have always been, as long as I've been affiliated with the DOE complex, we've always been tasked with analyzing our hazards and looking at the activities and making sure we're within a proper safety envelope which the DOE approves. So because our document is older, doesn't mean the controls in that document are bad, but we do look forward to bringing our document into compliance with the new standards and looking at the control set that will be yielded after we go through the analysis. We do have we have many effective controls in place right now in Area G for our drums that are stored there and some of our upcoming activities like the corrugated metal pipe activities and what have you. But I am glad we have reached agreement with the Department of Energy to get the modern document in place and go through all the analysis that it takes and get a really good control set in place so we can look forward to hopefully the next 5 years of operations at N3B. Now, you referenced some difficulties that we had on headspace gas sampling and what have you. We did encounter what we call potential inadequacies in the safety analysis of the older document, and we had several inadequacies that we identified. And it was a pretty large number, but again, we are dealing with an older document. So the process allows for those pieces, as the board well know. And so we can address those issues one by one and put controls in place through a justification of continued operation, which we were able to do in several of those cases that you mentioned. And so those controls were implemented, and we look forward to delivering that document to DOE in the third quarter timeframe and continuing to work on our analysis and get continued safe storage and processing capabilities at Area G.
Ms. Roberson, I'd just like to revise and extend my corporate partners one aspect of the remark. You asked January, that's second quarter, so again, the transparency for the board and the members of the public listening. The January was a date at one point, but it has slipped a little bit. It is into third quarter. I anticipate being able to still hold the implementation date, but there were some questions and some things that we needed to spend a little more time on. The air dispersion modeling, for example, there were some things in there that has shifted the submittal date from the second quarter to the third quarter. But I have a high confidence in the third quarter delivery. I have a high confidence in the timeframe that the department has set for reviewing it and approving it, which is the first quarter of '24, and we're expecting 90 days or less for implementation, which would be the second quarter of '24, and I have a high confidence we're going to meet that or better it.
Thank you. I appreciate you clarifying that. I was going to follow up as well, too. And I appreciate you addressing, because that was going to be my next question, as your office prepared to do its review so that implementation can be timely as well, too. And so I still want to know if you have the resources and support that you need to complete the federal review in a timely manner.
Thank you for the question, Ms. Roberson. Yes, I do have the resources. I'll briefly outline some of them. We've established an integrated project team consisting of N3B and my staff to do the day-to-day oversight and development of the document of safety analysis, but we've also established an independent safety basis review team led by Bob Nelson, who was a co-author of the new 5506 standard. So he's highly knowledgeable of what the new standard, what's in the new standard, how it was changed, and that gives me more assurance that what we're developing will be compliant with not just the 2014 version of 3009 standard, but also the updated expectations in the new 5506 standard. The safety basis review team is engaged with the integrated project team on a routine basis, so they're aware and have a chance to provide feedback, but also step away for the independence. I've relied on the safety basis review team, an awful lot of corporate reach back to headquarters and other resources that we have across the complex, and I'm using my current staff as part of the integrated project team so that my team can focus on the development of the DSA, keep it moving, making sure they're getting real-time feedback from the Safety Basis Approval Authority while still maintaining the independence and active engagement of a safety basis review team.
Thank you, sir. And I guess my last question probably goes to you, Mr. O'Leary. We've seen some beautiful safety bases developed and then take forever to be implemented. And so we're interested in, you guys are developing it, you have a sense of what implementation will look like. Can you talk to, generally speaking, what implementation will take, as best you know?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Robeson. We, from an operational standpoint, I'm going to speak from my operational standpoint, we've been involved in every step of the way of the new DSA development through the hazard analysis tables, the controls that are going to be put in place. So we wanted to make sure that whatever we have, we can actually implement. So we're looking, we're very confident that we can implement what we've seen so far in this new DSA development. And Kim said that we were going to have that done in the third quarter. I believe we're going to have the implementation done in early 24, and then we'll be able to step forward and go forward working under that new DSA. But once again, we've been involved in every step of the way because, once again, from an operational standpoint, we got to be able to operate to it. So I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it does. Look forward to it. We're excited. We think a holistic new DSA is so important. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Roberson. And the next question goes to Mr. Summers.
Thanks, Chair Connery. Mr. O'Leary, the next three questions are directed towards you, sir. There's still a great deal of underground waste at Area G, and in Exhibit 9, on the left, we can see a photo highlighting locations that hold buried waste that promises to be a tricky retrieval operation. The right side of the exhibit shows some historical photos of work in trenches A through D on the top and in pit 9 on the bottom. As I understand, the new safety basis, when complete, will still not allow for below-ground waste retrieval, but there will be a future mission need to perform this below-ground waste retrieval work. So the first question, Mr. O'Leary, is what will be the safety basis approach that you intend to pursue as you begin below-ground waste retrieval activities?
We will have to, excuse me, Thank you for the question. As you stated, the current safety basis that we're developing now only addresses what the operations we're doing above grade. So we will either have to revise the safety basis or do an addendum to that safety basis to address the below grade retrievals. The first retrieval we're going to do below grade is pit 9. So then that'll be in our option period, and we're in the planning process for that right now. So we're developing the technical approach. We're going to identify the hazards, and we'll go through the process so that we develop a safety basis once again that we can operationally implement.
Thank you. The second question is, what will be the safety approach to minimizing or better protecting above ground material at risk once it is retrieved?
We'll do a systematic approach when we retrieve these containers from below ground. We're not going to bring them all up at one time unless we have the processing capability at the surface. So it's going to be a balancing act. We want to stay below our MAR limits at the surface or our material risk limits at the surface. We don't want to bring things up if we're not ready to bring them up. So that's going to be our approach. We're going to optimize our facilities at the surface, and we're going to balance that against our retrieval operations.
Thank you. And finally, the third question is, you have some previous experience at Idaho National Laboratory, which has faced similar situations. To what extent is N3B able to work with its counterparts at INL in order to understand lessons learned from INL's operations?
I can address that. I was at Idaho for a short period of time. I also work for the individual at other places that currently runs the operations for Transatlantic up there. So I have a relationship with him. So I can reach out to him to get lessons learned from their experience in the ARP facility, as well as what they're doing currently. So we'll take advantage of that, and we've been talking to them all along as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Madam Chair?
So unlike the safety basis, we're running ahead of schedule. Just kidding. Little levity. I want to ask my fellow board members if they have any additional questions for the panel at this time. Ms. Robertson?
No, I don't have any. I appreciate the information we've gained. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Summers?
No, ma'am, I do not have any further questions. Thank you.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're running a little ahead of time. We're going to take a 15-minute break. So at 1:45, we're going to resume back here, and that will be public comment time. We'll have, depending on how many of you want to speak, again, and we encourage you to sign up to speak if you would like to address the panel. You're going to make remarks. We're not necessarily going to engage in discussion with you, but this is your chance to say what you'd like to say about what you just heard, and any other thoughts you have regarding the EM mission. After we conclude the public comment period, then the board will provide closing remarks, and I encourage our friends from EM and from N3B to stick around for public comments. But at this point in time, because I'm sure you need a break, I know I do, we'll take a 15-minute break and resume at 1:45. Thank you. If everybody could start to take your seats. We are almost to public comment period time. We're going to resume session for those of you in the room and those of you streaming. It's now time for our public comment period. We've set aside about a half an hour this afternoon, but we will have more time this evening following our NNSA session. So I'm going to hand things over to our General Counsel, Eric Fox, who will be handling the public comment period. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, the board would like to provide an opportunity for comments from interested members of the public. A list of those speakers who have contacted the board is posted at the entrance to this room. We have generally listed the speakers in the order in which they contacted us. I will call the speakers in this order and ask that the speakers state their name and affiliation at the beginning of their comments. There is also a table at the entrance to this room with a sign-up sheet for members of the public who wish to make comments but did not have the opportunity to notify us ahead of time. They will follow those who have already registered in the order in which they have signed up. To give everyone wishing to make a comment an equal opportunity, we ask that speakers limit their original comments to 5 minutes. I will provide a warning when you have 1 minute left and again at 30 seconds. The chair will give consideration for additional time if the schedule allows. Remarks should be limited to comments, technical information, or data concerning the subject of today's hearing. The first speaker we have is Scott Kovac from Nuclear Watch, New Mexico.
Thank you, Chair Connery and members of the board and staff. My name is Scott Kovac. I'm with Nuclear Watch New Mexico here in Santa Fe. I would just like to, just a couple of quick comments. It was mentioned earlier today that there's about approximately 170 certified drums or containers for shipment to WIP ready to go, with another 450 or so in the queue. So that's and last year, LANL shipped about 100 to WIP. So this is, we're looking at 5 or 6 years worth of shipments already lined up here, not counting the other 1,100 or so. And I wonder if there's some way we can, get those shipments, we need to increase the frequency of those shipments, because 100 a year, is not enough to keep up with what's being certified to ship. Thank you. Also, I want to thank you for focusing on cleanup at Area G. But my question is, how many similar drums are still buried under Area G? And I'm not talking about the retrievable transuranic. I'm talking about the waste that's planned to be left behind under a cap and cover scenario forever. We ask the board to look at the hundreds of thousands of cubic meters that are still buried at Area G. There are estimates are of 46,000 cubic meters of true buried at Area G, planned to be left behind. And as we all know, LANL is in a seismic zone between a rift valley and a dormant supervolcano. And this is not where we should be keeping transuranic waste with a half-life of 22,000 years. As we know, WIP is 2,100 feet deep approximately, and Area G is 65 feet deep. So, how can Area G be the ending resting place for so much transuranic waste when we're working so hard to get the rest of the transuranic waste into WIP? And then we're going to leave vast quantities of it buried forever above our aquifer. And speaking of our aquifer, how can we be assured? How can the public be assured that seismic activity won't somehow loosen up or dump or open up a crack or dump the contents of the MDAG into the aquifer? We asked the safety board to please consider looking at some of our cleanup issues. For instance, material disposal area C is in front of our hardworking environment department right now. And if the board could back us up or look at, or just take a look at some of the performance assessments that are given on these areas, that it's hard for the public to look at itself by itself without help. It's very technical, and anyway, that we need your help looking at the other buried scenarios at Los Alamos. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you have a written statement, would you please give it to Ms. Tara Tadlock if you'd like to submit it to the hearing record? Thank you. So next up, we have Kathy Sanchez from the Sayin Circle of Grandmothers.
I'll speak first in Tewa. Nanodi wake up, I could the God to the Nento one day, Addy, the Kaget Nami, Nambi Pin, Nambi Home, Nambi Ombre. We don't the money head out, he would be Good. So I am Kathy Wempovi Sanchez from San Ildefonso Pueblo, adjacent to the sharing the borders with the LANL, and I belong to Teoima United, and our circle of grandmothers are the wisdom keepers, and we've been having dialogues with our youth over the past couple of months, and we have a project called Bing Ha. Bing Ha means the breath of our hearts, the breath in us. And so when we're talking about nuclear issues, we're also sharing that breath with all of the multiverse and all of the nations. So everybody is affected by nuclear business. And I was born in 1950 at a time when there was an emphasis on being the first to have the nuclear bomb as a deterrent to ending war, which we know didn't happen because we're still here now. And at that time, a lot of our community members were hired to work up there. And now we have third generations of them coming down. And we're losing a lot of our populations because of the deaths due to cancer or to the beryllium illnesses or to having our children have leukemia now. So there's a lot of health impacts. And we're still in trauma from the knowing that when we were growing up, we were hearing the detonations. We were hearing duck and cover issues in schools. And it's still now. We're still at it now. And nothing has really moved the barometer, the meter, towards safety, towards actually doing away with a very toxic business. And so the children were also asking if there is a massive increase with their money that has come into there, and they're going to increase pit productions, and they're going to bring all these workers. They've been working on the issue of indigenous women missing and murdered, and what safety precautions have been given to these workers coming in, pre-business hiring, or once they're hired, the paperwork that says they will abide by some standard of not engaging in sexual harassment, sexual business, and enticing our young people. It's going to be massive movement building that's hiring a lot of people coming in. And so safety also is on both sides. And and doing the work and being in the area with the nuclear industry, I am also been nationally involved and internationally involved with nuclear safety organizations. And we are, should be considered partners, collaborators with the nuclear industry in promoting and ending to a toxic business. How do we transition in our goal and time on both sides that we are working together for the safety of our people? If it's safety, security, safety, resources, we need to work together. We're not the enemy. We're friendly. We're coming from the heart for all people to be well. And that is the emphasis we should be having. But looking at the lab's mission 2030, it says all things nuclear, they're going to really ramp up that because
1 minute.
Oh, 1 minute. Because they've been given a lollipop. They've been given candy. They've been given the money. And they're going to fight tooth and nail to save that. But the sharing should be there. And not just economically giving them our taxpayer money to the labs, and then to give it to us. I think it should be a dual partnership in that they give our taxpayer money back to us so that we can work
30
on our
seconds.
wellness. Oh, so I just present the safety board with the blessings that you are doing great work and great job and partnering with hearing the concerns that we have as citizens. So thank you so very much.
Thank you for your statement. Next, we have Anna Hansen from the Santa Fe County Commission.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board for being here. I personally consider you one of the most important boards in the United States. You are here to protect the public, which is paramount in many of my constituents' concerns. Cleanup is a primary concern of ours at LANL, and safe transportation across the state of New Mexico is an incredibly important issue to my constituents and to me, of course. So I echo the comments that more waste off the hill, the better. And we want more waste sooner rather than later. But I had a few questions on the presentation. First of all, next time you come, because my constituents care about this, is the venting of tritium. That is a big concern. I know that wasn't a topic for today. And also, the consent decree is another big topic here because we believe the 2016 consent decree does not really address cleanup to the issues that we would like. And then I know you are also not speaking about WIP and DOE. But one of my questions in the presentation is, what happens to the water that you drain? I was really curious, like you have this drill and drain, well, where does the water go? I'm grateful for your resident inspectors. I also want to recognize that I do believe DOE did listen to me, EM, in March of 2020, right before the pandemic started, when I requested a manager who I could work with. And I am grateful to have Michael Michelanis, who, not that I will always agree with him, but that I have a working relationship with him. And in order for things to get done, it is important for myself as an elected official and for the people who in this community who care that they have someone who will actually return their phone calls and talk to them about the issues. So that is a step forward that we have not had in the past. So I want to recognize DOE for at least, hopefully, listening to me. I have been coming to these meetings for at least, it seems, the last 15 or 20 years. We have missed you during the pandemic, and we're happy to have you back. So we hope that you will come back again soon so that some of these other issues can be addressed, especially the tritium release. I'm not going to make any comments about NNSA now. I will make those later. But, you know, one of the other things that is very concerning to all of my constituents also, because some of them are workers at LANL and at NB3 and DOE, is worker safety. And so the more that we can improve worker safety, that is a huge concern. And so I want to support more worker safety as much as possible because that is really important. And so I want to thank you once again for being here and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your statement. Next, we have Barney McGrath from Nuclear Safety Advocates.
Thank you for coming. I understand this is a public hearing, so even though I might ask some questions, I don't expect answers, right? And the last time you guys were here in Albuquerque, I was able to talk and we were able to ask questions. So that's my first question is, why can't we ask questions? So I don't expect answers, okay? My name is Barney McGrath. I'm a member of a small nuclear safety group, Nuclear Safety Advocates Group, NSAG. Basically, we are concerned citizens who care about the safety, about our safety while we live next to a nuclear weapons factory. Our group has had several meetings with the DNFSB that is before you, and I've had quite a challenge pronouncing that acronym for a long time, right? So I had to break it up into two different words. First was DN, as in Danukes, and the second is FSB, as in funny, silly bombs. So now I can say that 10 times in a row. DNFSB, DNSSB, 10 times. All right. You guys are the good guys. We are glad you are here, and we wish you could come here more often. The way I learn about nuclear safety at LANL is I read the newspaper. Our group reads the newspaper, and when one of the members of our group notices an article in the New Mexican about nuclear safety, it alerts the rest of us, and we print it out and talk about it. After this article is printed out and we study it, what we do is we go to the DNFSB website and we look at safety reports. Okay, once we find the safety report that is referenced in the newspaper article, then we get more complete picture of the incident. So on November 7th, the New Mexican, for instance, published an article on Area G safety incident. It was a heat-related incident. Okay, so then we can go to the safety report and read about that, and it tells us, lo and behold, that the corrugated metal pipes, which are basically culverts, are being dug up and disassembled and then put back in barrels again. So this is a long process over the last, 75 years, where these culverts were, nuclear waste was put in them, they're filled with cement, buried. Now, they're unburying them, cutting them apart, putting them in barrels, burying them again. Okay, so that's what I understand from the articles that we read. The other thing in the same safety report was an issue related to the plutonium facility. And it turns out this glove and bag, or this bag operation with glove boxes I'm not sure what's going on, but it sounds like they're reinventing the glove box by designing a new door. So taking off the old doors, bagging them, and then getting rid of those. Well, on the very first day of this operation of the CMP, the corrugated metal pipe, and of this Area G, this plutonium facility glove box thing, work is stopping. Work is stopping right away. And it doesn't seem like there's any progress being made. So that's how we get our information, what we think of it. And lastly, I would like to mention that according to Tara, no congressional representation is signed up for public comments on either of your sessions. So that tells you that our congressional representation is giving
30
us
seconds.
a cold shoulder. Okay, they are not participating at all. And I just wanted to point that out. Now, I could be wrong. In the session later today, they could show up, but they haven't signed up. They're giving us the cold shoulder, and they always have. And that's why we need you guys. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Next, we have John E. Wilkes III from Veterans for Peace.
Thank you. I'm John Edward Wilkes III, Vice President of Veterans for Peace, Albuquerque. Now that I have 5 minutes, I'll use a minute for a preface. I have a 3-minute statement I'm going to read. I have also filed with the clerk of the board a longer statement, which is more in-depth and more useful to your work. Veterans for Peace is 35 years old. It's in every state in the union. We have 120 chapters, and there's 6 chapters overseas. The Albuquerque chapter's primary focus is on waste, nuclear waste, the handling, transportation, storage, disposition. That's what I do for the chapter. The Santa Fe chapter works on other nuclear issues like sole presidential use authority, launch on warning, which aircraft are configured to use the weapons, modernization of the nuclear arsenal, those kind of things. I only work on storage and waste of nuclear issues. I want to reemphasize and repeat something that was said. The new field office for EM at LANL, the manager, is an all-star. We're thrilled to have him. The presentation he gave yesterday to the legislature committee was effective, articulate, useful, and very welcomed. So I want to thank him for being here with us. He is on a very short honeymoon. His agency has no honeymoon. It has no credibility, and it has no merit as far as we're concerned. The 3 people at that table, the panel, they are doing a job that they have inherited. It's very difficult. They're trying to innovate techniques. They're trying to hire, train, deploy, and clean up a mess that has gone on since 1943. Now I will read my statement. My remarks solely address the imminent and severe threat to public health and safety of the environment posed by the buried radioactive and mixed solid and liquid waste of Area G and Technical Area 54. We are urging the board to strongly recommend to the DOE Secretary and the NNSA Administrator to immediately exhume, characterize, and remove all subterranean waste and the associated contaminated soil and water in Area G, along with the migration pathways from Area G. Further, we request that the board recommend against the current proposal by the agencies to cap and cover, which of course we call hide and hope, any waste from the Pajarito Plateau. Commissioner Summers brought up a great question. He asked about the buried waste in Pit 9. We have got to reverse the priority. It's buried waste because it's a threat to the community. Then it's above ground, true waste. Then we go with the current generated waste, much less the pit waste that's en route from the weapons plant. Since 1943, federal agencies have entombed in unlined pits, dumps, shafts, and sumps radioactive waste of all characters. Because Area G is located at a high elevation, the waste residue has migrated down the gradient as well as escaped into the ambient air.
1 minute.
The agricultural fields downhill and to the east of the site, the regional drinking water aquifer, public water supply wells, and the groundwater in the immediate vicinity are at imminent risk of contamination from the waste. In 2002, a test well located 500 feet east of Area G showed contamination of the regional aquifer in low levels of tritium, strontium-90, and technetium-99. In 2004,
30 seconds.
Area G encompasses 32 pits, 194 shafts, and 4 trenches at depths ranging from 10 to 65 feet below the mesa top. The waste has little or no primary containment. Beneath the surface, plumes of toxic gases, radioactive tritium, cover most of the waste. Low-level transuranic, mixed, toxic, non-radioactive material compromised the aggregate. In 1994, DOE estimated the waste at the Los Alamos contained 610 kilograms of plutonium, most of which is under Area G. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Next we have Cindy Wheeler from 285 Alliance.
I hope this doesn't screech. Thank you for existing. So I'm Cindy Wheeler. I'm co-chair of 285 Alliance, and I'm commenting and asking questions for many of the people who live in New Mexican communities and are worried. I have a comment. You know, the images showing the cleared spaces to protect LANL from being broached by fire, those spaces are actually very small if you understand how strong the spring winds are in New Mexico. Fire jumps whole canyons here in seconds. And this small removal of brush and trees, at least what's demonstrated in the image, seems inadequate. And I want you to be aware that during these fires, the people of New Mexico are terrified that plutonium will be released and vaporized by wildfire and destroy their land forever. The other thing is a question which I realize won't be answered now, but I hope you will think about it. I'd like to know what studies have been done and what the results are on whether true packs would contain an explosion from within the true pact. So, for instance, they're very sturdy little things as I understand them, but if that drum had exploded before it got to WIP and emplaced in the underground, what would have happened if it had exploded inside the true pact? How safe would that have been? Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Next we have Joni Ahrens from CCNS.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Thank you so much for being here. We are so grateful that you are. And thank you to the DOE, the alphabet of people at LANL who were here this morning, or this afternoon. So I have 5 different comments, and I'll go through them quickly. We're behind. As a public, we're behind. The LANL SWICE is behind schedule. So the 1979 SWICE was the first site-wide environmental impact statement. It was 20 years before we got our second SWICE. Then the third SWICE was done in 2008, 9 years later. But now we've been waiting since 2018, and we're almost 5 years behind schedule. And as you know, these are 10-year review periods. Right now, they're saying that the current SWICE the SWICE that they're working on right now will cover 15 years. But there's no justification for expanding that time. At the same time, the hazardous waste permit renewals are behind schedule as well for WIP and for LANL. They both expired in 2020. They're already almost 3 years behind schedule. And so we need your help as a board, an oversight board, to have more information, to have more conversations, to be able to have more public hearings like this, to talk about the concerns of the people. And I do want to address the fact that, we really need transparency on these newly generated shipments as well as the legacy shipments, because it doesn't make sense that the information isn't readily available to the public. Under the hazardous waste permit, there's a waste, the WIS, the waste something, Ms. Robertson may know what it is, And we should be able to have access to that because it has the volumes, it has the sources, and it should be readily available. And it needs to be readily available as soon as possible because of ongoing concerns about NNSA taking over shipments to WIP as opposed to getting the legacy waste exhumed and moved from Area G. I also have a question. I appreciate the comments by Mr. O'Leary that I wanted to know about the maintenance of the tents, because sometimes we see at Area G that we see RIP tents, and the manufacturers of those tents have regular schedules for maintenance. And when we asked about that in 2010, when the hazardous waste permit was up for renewal, there was nobody had any good answers for when the maintenance was done on those tents to protect them, you know, with the fire retardant on the outside and also for wind and sun damage. So then I really have a question about the transition plan. When the treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons went into effect almost 2 years ago, there's really a question about a transition for LANL to come into compliance, for the U.S. to come into compliance, and the jobs that could be created as a result of coming into compliance with the treaty, to keeping track of all of the radio, the weapons, yes, sir, the weapons materials around the country. And so, one more question, just with all of the problems with the hiring process right now, why are we expanding pit production when we can't even clean up the mess that's already been taking place? And also that there's jobs in the U.S. for coming into compliance with the treaty, and we need to move in that direction. So I want to thank you again very much.
Thank you for your statement. Next, we have Arla S. Ertz from the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom.
Thank you so much, Chair, Board, and everyone else. As you said, my name is Arla Ertz. I am from Veterans for Peace, Chapter 63, Albuquerque, and Chapter 69, San Francisco, and Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, the San Francisco branch. Unlike Mr. McGrath, who spoke earlier, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the protocol here. I didn't know questions wouldn't be answered. I have what should be an easy question for Mr. O'Leary, but I see that the Los Alamos and N3B, whatever that is, folks, are no longer impaneled. But here's the question. Mr. O'Leary, you mentioned earlier when asked about what you plan to bring to your work from your past experience at the Idaho National Lab, that you will be in consultation with your contact there about lessons learned that you can apply, and also that you've already been in ongoing contact. That's very good, but on the vague side, could you give us some specifics of substance about what you have been consulting about so far and what you hope to get enlightened about in the future? Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. That's everyone who signed up. I think we have time for one more. Is there anybody else who would like to provide a statement? So if anyone has written comments, please hand them to Tara Tadlock over at the table, or she's in the back there. And you could also email them to us at hearing@dnfsb.gov. And with that, I'll turn things back over to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Eric has one of the toughest jobs in the room because he has to be the one who keeps track of time. If you noticed, we weren't doing that to ourselves, so I apologize to the public for having to keep the time, and I understand that there is confusion about the answering of questions. Again, please feel free to, if you have statements that you want to make for the record, you can still send those to us. You can get in contact with Tara. She's over at the table now. If there's more information that you would like to share, I believe that our colleagues from EM, they're just not sitting up here, but they are in the audience, so they might be able to entertain your questions as well after we conclude this part of the hearing. So with that, I actually want to turn to my fellow board members to make closing remarks, and I will start with Vice Chair Summers.
Thank you, Chair Connery. I would just like to offer that LANL, N3B, Department of Energy, our elected officials that are here today, and the concerned citizens of New Mexico, as well as the public, have made progress in addressing some of these transuranic waste issues at LANL. Together, I'm very hopeful, and again, hopeful, that we can make even more progress that will be made on the behalf of our American citizens as well as our great nation. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Connery.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Ms. Robertson?
Thank you, Chair Connery. I want to thank the members. I want to thank the members of the public that attended this hearing in person and virtually, and I want to thank those members that spoke today. I'd like to thank Mr. Michelanis, Ms. Lieback, and Mr. O'Leary for your participation and contribution to this hearing session. Achieving risk reduction, implementing a comprehensive modern safety basis, and achieving fully qualified staff, federal and contractor, are the keys to reliable, high-confidence, safe operations and worker protection. I look forward to our next opportunity to discuss the Department and N3B's progress toward those goals. Thank you, Chair Connery.
Thank you, Ms. Robertson. I'd like to add my thanks as well to Mr. Michelanis. Sounds like you have a fan club here, but it's probably a very short window, so take advantage of it. I would like to thank Ms. Lieback and Mr. O'Leary from N3B for all your contributions as well. I really did appreciate the open and honest dialogue that we were able to have today. I think that our colleagues showed the challenges that they face, and they didn't make excuses for work that has been delayed. I just want to make a comment about stop work. Stop work is a good thing. We're from a safety organization. When we see something that may go awry, when we run into the unexpected, when the unknowns crop up, the real thing that you do is stop work, and then you consider what the implications are for moving forward. So I just want to commend both N3B and EMLA for being willing to take that step, because what we don't want is for work to continue and safety to be compromised. So I understand that that's somewhat of a difficult concept, but we never want production to be put over safety, even if that production means removing waste from the hill. I also want to recognize the challenges of the workforce. Keeping the workforce, we have some of the similar challenges. Keeping a trained workforce is very important. It's difficult to train folks, particularly in the oversight field and the safety field. But making sure that they're developed and well-trained is important. And again, that goes to the conduct of operations and making sure that there's safety. I was also encouraged, I know that we had some comments about the underground waste versus the above-ground waste. Again, if your workforce is untrained or untested, you want to do the easy stuff first. And then you want to make sure that you can do that really, really well before you get to the harder stuff. So I do understand why that decision was taken. With regard to the safety basis documents, again, that may seem to the public as something not as important as the actual work being done, but as I emphasized in my opening remarks, the safety basis document is the analysis of the work to be performed, the hazards associated with that work, and the safety controls needed to adequately protect, prevent, or mitigate those hazards. So I recognize that you're working under an old safety base, Ms. Lieback, and I understand that doesn't necessarily mean you aren't taking precautions and that you're looking at each of the activities that you're going to do, such as the glove bagging and the drill and drain, and you're making sure that those are safe before you do them. However, we've been waiting since 2015 to see a safety basis. And between January 2020 and August 2022, you had 24 potential inadequacies of the situation. And you ended up with 6 justification of operations. While that doesn't mean that you weren't working safely, that is not ideal for the type of work that's being done. So there is more work to be done. We appreciate the fact that you are reaching back to those who have experience, whether they're in Idaho, whether in Oak Ridge, whether at headquarters, and we hope that you'll continue to do so. And we want to, again, thank everybody for being there. Thank the citizens who came here today, those of you who are watching, and those of you who got up to the microphone. That's not an easy task. But at the end of the day, you're the taxpayers, you're the people who live here, your grandmothers and your grandchildren are here. And so we respect the fact that you have a voice, and an important voice, in what happens here in your communities. So at this point in time, we are going to finish session 1, and I'm going to adjourn the hearing until 4 o'clock. We will come back and resume and have the conversation about NNSA. Thank you all.